All right, let's dive straight in. You sent us a really interesting piece this time, a GameSpot article. This horror platformer is not for those with a fear of heights.
Yeah,
So, like always, we've taken a good look, and yeah, we're ready to unpack what makes it tick for you, the listener.
exactly. And the game, White Knuckle, it immediately caught our eye. Horror games, they often go down familiar paths, right? Monsters, jump scares, that sort of thing.
The usual suspects.
But this one, it seems like it's coming at fear from a totally different angle. And that's what felt really worth exploring together here.
Absolutely. I mean, the core idea, just reading the article, it's really striking. We're talking about a horror game where the main scare factor isn't some, creature jumping out.
Right.
It's the terrifying idea of just falling from a massive height inside this huge silo, which even that setting feels, well, different for horror. So our mission for this deep dive is really to get to grips with what makes White Knuckle stand out. Understand the mechanics, the kind of feel it's going for, especially if you're someone who likes new takes on horror and game design.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts, that core concept first. The article makes it clear it's first person. And it's all about climbing walls inside this gigantic silo. Now, the central threat here is fascinating. Forget monsters. It's this rising, murky sludge.
Right.
So your main goal isn't fighting. It's just stay ahead of it. Keep climbing upwards. A desperate race, basically.
It's almost like an upside-down platformer, isn't it? Usually you're just aiming up, but here there's this thing pushing you up.
Yeah, exactly.
And the article hints there's this mystery about the silo itself. Like, the reviewer wasn't sure what it was for, but felt there was a story there.
That's right. There's definitely a sense of uncovering something. Makes you think about the atmosphere,
Yeah.
What kind of story is told just by the environment.
What are the clues? What's scattered around that tells you about this place, this sludge?
That's a really interesting point about how it builds the story and the tension. If the silo itself is the main obstacle, maybe even the antagonist, they becomes like a character in these little hints. The mystery, the sludge, they just add to the unease. They make you want to climb to figure it out.
So, okay, terrifying premise established. How do you actually, get around in there? The article mentions the gameplay, the mechanics, and the reviewer's first thoughts. Sound like the controls were a bit tricky.
Yeah, hard to understand was the phrase used, I think, at first.
Which can be worrying sometimes. But they also said the controls eventually clicked.
Right, after a short while.
I wonder if that initial struggle is, deliberate to make you feel more vulnerable.
That's a great point. It could absolutely be a design choice. Make that first climb feel clumsy, precarious, match how the character feels.
Yeah.
Or, maybe it's just early access feedback they'll tweak.
It does make you wonder how steep that learning curve is. Don't want to frustrate people before they get to the scary heights bit.
But the article does break down the main actions. Swinging hand to hand, using pittons, those metal spikes you hammer in for a good hold.
Ah, right.
And even throwing rebar, like chucking a piece of metal to make a new handhold further away.
Ooh, okay.
It sounds very hands-on, very deliberate, not just jumping, but really interacting with the wall, managing your grip.
And it sounds like there's real risk involved in just moving, right? It's not automatic.
Definitely, though.
You're deciding, where do I reach? Do I use a piton here? Do I risk throwing that rebar? The tension must just ramp up like crazy when you're way up high and feel your grip slipping.
Absolutely. And to stop you falling all the way back down every time, there are temporary checkpoints.
Okay, that's something.
As you climb, bits of the silo below become inaccessible. So it's a safety net, kind of. But, and this is crucial from the article, those checkpoints only work if the sludge hasn't reached them yet.
Ah, so even the safe spots aren't totally safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even those moments of relief are tied to that rising threat. Constant pressure.
That is clever. Keeps you on edge. It's not just get to the next ledge. It's get there before the sludge does. Now, the article also mentioned resource management, which, like you said, is pretty common in horror, even if the horror here is unusual. Limited inventory.
Yep. Forces you to make choices, adds another strategic layer.
What kind of things are we talking about?
Well, the reviewer gives two key examples. One is this tin can with fluid that recharges your stamina. Vital for grip, obviously.
Right, you need stamina to hold on.
And the other is extra pitons for making safer holds on tricky sections. So the choice is, immediate stamina boost or longer-term safety option.
And you're making that choice while dangling hundreds of feet up.
Precisely. It forces you to think ahead, weigh the odds.
Yeah.
A bad choice doesn't just mean you're stuck. It could mean, well, a long fall.
Okay, so this really brings us to that big question. Can a game without monsters, without jump scares, actually feel like horror? The reviewers seem to grapple with that too initially.
Yeah, and what's interesting is how they described getting it, like an epiphany.
Hmm.
They realized the act of climbing itself, with that constant, very real danger of falling, that becomes the terror.
Mm.
It's not something chasing you, it's your own vulnerability, the knowledge that one slip,
Hmm.
catastrophic, it taps into
Hmm.
something more primal, maybe. Fear of the environment itself.
And they use that amazing comparison. Mirror's Edge by way of Unending Night Terrors.
Yeah,
Mirror's Edge is all about that first-person parkour momentum flow. So imagine that feeling, needing precise moves, but then crank the stakes up to life or death with this huge drop always waiting.
exactly. It paints a really vivid picture of the kind of like stomach-churning anxiety it could create.
The horror isn't some external thing, it's internal. The fear of messing up, the fear of gravity.
Yeah, the fear of failure, losing your grip, the psychological weight of just being that high up with so little between you and the bottom. The article even calls the fear exhilarating, strangely.
Right, that weird thrill you get from high-stakes situations in games sometimes.
Hmm. Well-designed tension can do that.
So, beyond the climbing and the fear, what else is going on in the silo? The article mentions some world-building stuff. Strange signage. A disembodied voice.
Yeah, it sounds like these aren't just decorations. They add to the mystery. Like, what is this place?
Makes you wonder what story is unfolding while you're just trying not to fall.
Apparently, these things offer sort of fragmented clues. The voice announces things, like mundane workplace goings-on, but it only gives you a fraction of a clue.
Ah, so it's drip-fed.
Suggests a story you piece together slowly, rewarding you for paying attention while you climb. Adds another layer beyond just survival.
Definitely makes you wonder if figuring out the silo story helps you somehow, or just makes the whole situation even weirder.
Could be.
Okay, so who is this game actually for? The article seemed pretty clear on who it's not for.
Oh yeah. Big warning.
Ah,
If you have a fear of heights, this is explicitly not recommended. Steer clear.
makes sense.
But beyond that,
Mm.
the reviewer thought the mechanics, the precision, the speed potential might really appeal to speedrunners.
Ah, interesting. Mastering the climb, finding the fastest routes, I can see that.
Yeah, that community loves a good movement challenge.
And for anyone whose interest is piqued, when can they actually get their hands on it? Or maybe
Right.
get their pitons in it?
Mhm. Good one. The article says Steam Early Access, April 17th, 2025. And the publisher is interesting too. Dread XP. The article calls them an oddball label,
Yeah.
known for putting out unconventional horror games.
Yeah.
And the fact that even they think White Knuckle is particularly unique, that says something.
It really underscores how different this concept is. Sounds like they're really pushing the boundaries of what horror can be, which is always cool to see. So let's wrap up our deep dive on White Knuckle. It really sounds like it's carving out its own niche in horror.
For sure.
It's stepping away from the jump scares, the monsters, and focusing instead on that really primal fear of heights, the danger of the climb itself inside this huge, mysterious structure.
Exactly. You've got the mystery of the silo, the tough choices with your limited gear, and just that raw terror that comes from knowing how vulnerable you are way up there.
Huh.
It all points to a game that could be genuinely unsettling, just in a very different way.
And that leads us to our final thought for you, the listener. Think about how games, or even movies and books, use vulnerability and that feeling of not being in control to create fear. Does this idea of environmental horror where the place itself is the threat, does that resonate with you? Maybe this deep dive has made you curious, maybe even brave enough to see if you could handle the heights of White Knuckle when it comes out next year. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.